Hi everybody, my name's Amelia and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to make a video inspired by a comment from one of you guys and talk a little bit about my personal tarot practice. So of course, in today's video, we're going to keep it pretty simple, pretty relaxed, and we're just going to talk about my daily tarot practice, the things that I do each day, and a few weird, quirky things that I just incorporate into my practice as a whole. The reason I wanted to just kind of go into the practice as a whole rather than just focusing on the day itself is because personally I don't do a ton of tarot work every single day, and some days I don't even touch a tarot deck. I'm serious. There are days where I am so busy, I'm going out, I'm out of the house. Like for example, this past Saturday I was out of the house from 10 a.m. until I believe like 9 p.m. So of course there wasn't really a lot of time to do a tarot activity or anything related to my personal practice. So my daily practice sort of changes, but I'll get into that once we start talking about the bulk of this video. But I figured I would just go ahead and tell you that this is about my practice as a whole, not just the daily sort of things that I do. Before we go ahead and jump into this video, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up because it really helps out me and my channel, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so like I said, first we're going to talk about my daily tarot practice, the things that I like to do every single day, if I can. And while my tarot practice tends to change sort of day to day, as in the types of readings that I do, when I do them, and just kind of in general, like no 2 days really look alike. But for the most part, I tend to try to do at least one small reading every single day. So the first thing I do in my daily tarot practice is a morning reading. So I will pull a deck, whatever deck is kind of calling to me. So it's all about aesthetics, the vibes, what I know about each deck. And I will pull a deck and I will do a morning reading. I tend to pick a lot of my lighter decks. So I do have some darker, more mysterious decks, and I have some light, more whimsical decks. And the ones that are light are the ones I tend to gravitate towards. I will take one of my lighter decks and I will do a very small reading. So this could be a 1-card pull for some energy that I need to draw in for the day. It could be a smaller spread for a journaling exercise, which I will put a video of up on the screen because I just made one on my Pinterest. I'll put the handle for my Pinterest as well. I do put more journaling and prompt ideas on there. I'm not quite sure if I made this a YouTube short or not, but I'll let you know if I did. But essentially, I will take 3 cards and I will do a what am I doing well, what do I need to work on, and what is something that I'm neglecting. So something that I haven't really been thinking about, but need to. That particular spread was inspired by Katie Flowers, who has a YouTube channel where she does a lot of tarot and practice things. So I kind of took some inspiration from a particular reading in one of her videos and then applied it to myself, and so that's why there's 3 cards in my personal spread versus the example she gave where there were 2. So what I'll do is I'll pull about 1 to 3 cards, and again, the exercise itself changes a lot. So sometimes, again, it's just a daily pull, just 1 card to tell me how my day is going to go. It could be that 3-card spread as I mentioned. Sometimes I'll do a different kind of 3-card spread, like a past, present, future sort of thing regarding a specific situation. Sometimes I'll do advice for the day and possible outcomes for the day. There's a lot of different spreads that I personally do in the mornings, but usually it's about goals and focusing your energy, finding something to think about as the day goes on. But I don't really do future-oriented things in my personal work. It does happen, but it's like very accidental as far as I'm concerned. I just don't really do that myself. So when I pull a card for the energy that I want to focus on for the day, it's not so much asking the deck, how's my day going to go? And rather it's asking the deck, what should I be focusing on today? So that's kind of how I look at it. My morning pulls usually result in some form of journaling, but so do my evening pulls as well, which I'll get into in a second. But I typically pair my journal with the tarot during my daily pulls because I think it's really important to reflect on why certain cards are popping up into your life. And it's also really nice to record them to see which cards are constantly showing up, to see what sort of themes I'm facing. At the end of the day, I have a different sort of spread thing that I do. So when it comes to the end of the day, I will pull some cards to reflect on my day. So sometimes I'll pull cards and be like, okay, here's a situation that happened today. What should I have learned from it? What am I missing? And how do I move forward? Sometimes I'll just draw 3 more cards to just kind of give me a message. I'll tell the deck to tell me anything it wants to share, and I will take it and try to figure it out myself. And sometimes at night I'll do even deeper spreads. So in the evenings, that's typically when I do my own shadow work and when I do the greater, larger spreads for myself. So I'll pull out some of my darker decks for the evening, and I will pull a ton of different cards, oracle cards as well, and just sort of see what I need to be working on, go deeper, dive a little bit deeper into my psyche. So the evenings are reserved for these bigger spreads, and in some cases I will journal about it afterwards. In other cases, if the spread isn't like above 5 to 8 cards, then I will write down all the cards and then try to decipher it that way based on the prompts that I used for the tarot spread itself or just in general. Again, the evening is sort of set aside for me for a personal practice. Sometimes I'll use my tarot cards in specific rituals, but that's sort of a more rare thing. For the most part, my daily practice is just those 2 things. It's just using tarot cards in the morning for myself to see what energy I need to draw upon, and then to use it in the evening for self-reflection. Now, moving forward, because I figured this video would be very quick, because my daily practice is very small and I didn't really want to film a whole video of me just performing it, I actually wanted to talk about a few of my tarot quirks and things that I do in my personal practice regarding my tarot, how I work with the decks, how I understand them, just so you can get a better idea of who I am as a tarot reader. Now, if you didn't already know, I do have a tarot reading business called Indie Tarot Mystique. I have an Instagram page, we have it on the website, it's there. Right now I only provide local readings to local Indiana residents, but at some point I am looking at expanding beyond the physical landscape, going on to virtual, like giving online readings, for example. I haven't figured out exactly how I want to do that yet, so for now, it's an idea. But if you are local and you want a reading with me, then check out Indie Tarot Mystique on Instagram or our website and you can book a reading there. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the odd things that I do in my practice, my personal practice, how I work with my decks. And the first one, you've already heard it before if you watched both my tarot and oracle collection videos, but I pair a crystal and a zodiacal association with every single deck. So I view tarot and oracle quite differently. Tarot to me is like the bread and butter of my personal practices. It's the main course of the readings, and oracle is like the cherry on top. It's the dessert. It's the final thing to kind of tie the reading together. I don't really use oracle decks on their own, simply because I find them to be a little vague, and I personally prefer the tarot. I also like that the tarot has very specific themes, and so sometimes when you use oracle decks, they miss out on a few themes that I think could be very potent and important in your personal reading. So some decks might focus on romance, but they aren't focusing on career when it comes to oracle. And so then it's like you might have missed something if you were to just pull that and you weren't really sure where you were looking. I don't know if that made sense. So I do kind of separate them in my mind, and on my shelves, literally, my oracle decks are on the top shelf, my tarot decks are on the bottom shelf, so they are very separated. But one thing that I do for both of them is put a crystal pairing. So every single deck that I own has a crystal association. It has a crystal paired with it. Sometimes the crystal is associated with the deck's energy. So sometimes, like for example, my smoky citrine is connected to my traditional RWS tarot deck because that deck loves career readings. It's my Capricorn deck. It loves career. It's all it wants to talk about. So the smoky citrine goes with that. My Tarot the Divine deck loves romance, so it gets paired with the rose quartz. But other decks, like my Crow Tarot, is paired with a red jasper, which kind of makes sense, but doesn't always. Red jasper being about grounding and stability, and the Crow Tarot for me is my deepest shadow work deck, the one that really dives into my soul and one that I do not use for anybody else. So every deck does have a crystal pairing, but it doesn't always make sense, and I think that for me it's about both aesthetic as well as the crystal's traditional meaning. And when it comes to my tarot decks, they have zodiacal associations. So every single tarot deck that I have has a zodiac sign paired with it. I am missing a few. I do not have an Aquarius deck, and I don't think I am missing an Aries deck now that I think about it. But there are a few zodiac signs that I am missing from my collection, so I'm hoping that I'll find decks that have that energy. But I typically ask my decks when I get them, when I receive decks, when I purchase decks. One of the first questions I ask them in the interview portion, where I ask them a lot of different things, but one of the questions is, if you had to pick a zodiac sign, which zodiac sign would you pick that would most align with you, your values, your energy? And then they tell me, and then I can decide later if that seemed accurate or not. But to this day, it's all seemed very accurate, so I think the deck knows. So yeah, that's one of the odd things I do in my practice, is give every single deck a zodiac sign and a crystal. And most of the time, both of them align very heavily with the deck's influence and energy. And it helps me to know exactly which deck I want to pull for different situations, because if I feel like I need more confidence in my life, I'm going to pick a Leo deck. If I want to find more balance, I'm going to pick a Libra deck. But then also the crystal associations play a part as well. So something else I touched on that's kind of odd in my practice is I have certain decks that I do not use for anyone else but myself. I have quite a few Oracle decks that I only use for myself, and I mentioned that in my Oracle deck collection video. One of them is the Archetypes Oracle by Kim Kranz, and the reason is because it's very complex and I don't fully understand the deck, so that's the reason I don't use it for other people. Certain decks that I do understand and have a very good grasp of, like the Spirit Animal Oracle by Colette Baron Reed, I use that for other people because I feel confident that I can give them a good reading based on my own understanding of each animal. But to go a step further, there are other decks that I just do not use for people, and one of them is the Crow Tarot. The Crow Tarot is like my soul deck. At this point, I'm pretty sure it's my soul deck. And I love it so much. It gives me wonderful, insightful readings. It's such a deep and profound deck for me. And so because of that, I do not share it with others. I do not pull out the Crow Tarot to give readings to anybody else. Sometimes when I have friends over, I will allow them to pick a deck, and quite a few times people have chosen the Crow Tarot, in which case I have to tell them that I do not use that one for anybody else, and so at this point I'm like, you can pick any deck except this one. And I don't know if it's because my energy and the connection I have is just so like magnetic with that deck in a sense. So when people visit, they automatically want that one because there's just a lot of energy tied up in that specific deck because of me and the usage that I have with it. But anyway, I do not use it for anybody else but myself. So if you ever are a client of mine, you will not be seeing the Crow Tarot on the table because I refuse to use it with anybody else but myself. Speaking of client readings, so another weird, quirky thing that I do in my practice is I ask my deck if it would be okay being used in a reading for a client. So I ask my deck for permission. Whenever I have clients that come to get a reading with me, I will kind of meditate on what I think their energy is. I'll consider what kind of reading they're getting for one. So if you get a romance reading from me, I'm not going to bring out my Capricorn deck because it probably wouldn't give you any good advice. Just throwing that out there. But I will pull out my Tarot of the Divine, but then I'll also pull out about 2 other tarot decks that I think might work for your reading. And so then I will sit down and I will really meditate on this idea of what I think the energy might be like, and then I'll ask all 3 decks, would you be okay with getting a reading with this client or performing a reading for this client? And I will ask, what kind of reading do you think you would give, and how do you think the reading will go? So I pull quite a few cards, about 9 if I have 3 decks, and I ask every deck the same questions to see what they're going to say. So sometimes I'll have a deck that's like, yes, I'd be fine giving a reading with the client, however, I would talk about this specific thing, maybe it's like a conflict with a friend. And I think that the reading would go okay, but not amazing. Like, it may work, it might not. Well, that would be a maybe deck for me, and then I'll ask others and just kind of see what they all think will happen. I want to pick a deck that's eager to give the reading, as well as a deck that thinks the reading is going to go very well. And I know it sounds funny talking about my decks as if they are their own entities, but at this point, because of the energy that surrounds them, I almost feel that way. Not that they are living and thinking necessarily, but I do think that every single deck has a very specific energy, and each deck has its own opinion slash understanding of how energies will collide and work together. So I don't want to force a deck to be used in a reading if it doesn't think it's going to give an accurate reading. My goal is always to give an accurate reading and to help the client as best as possible, and so my decks do get a say in what happens. But of course, I do not use decks without asking them if they're going to be okay with it. When it comes to friends, and as mentioned earlier, how friends pick a deck, that's a bit different, mostly because all of my decks have met my friends in a sense. The energy has been in the room, so I tend to feel like there's going to be a natural draw. And usually my decks have a good time, I think, breeding for the people. This brings me to another quirk that I have with my decks, and that is that I always knock on the deck 3 times before I use it and when I put it away. So I knock the energy out of my deck. The first 3 times is usually to wake up the deck, quote unquote, be like, I'm here, we're doing this. And the last time is to knock out the energy of the reading, especially tough readings. So I will knock on the deck to cleanse it and then put it back in its box. When it comes to cleansing, I only use a few methods. So one method is I will lay my deck next to selenite for the evening and it will just sit by the selenite. I put all of my crystal jewelry on selenite after wearing it for a day and then move it in the morning or rewear it or something, but I cleanse all my jewelry that way, and I'll sometimes do that in my decks where I'll just put it next to selenite, let it sit, and then it'll be cleansed. I also cleanse the crystals that all my decks have, so I'll do it by color at this point because I have so many crystals, so I will do it by color, and so then every now and again it cycles through and my deck gets a cleansed crystal and has it cleansed or charged, etc. I will also cleanse decks by using incense, so I'll hold them and I'll use incense around them. This typically happens during ritual work or during full moons, new moons, different types of celestial events. And then I will also sometimes sound cleanse with the bell, but that's sort of like a last resort if a deck just seems like it hasn't been cleansed any other way. I'll also put my decks back in order, and that's usually the first way I will cleanse them or reset their energies, especially when the deck seems cranky or expresses that it is not in the mood to give good readings. So when it comes to putting my decks back in order, I really only do it if the deck is giving inaccurate readings, if it feels like it has cranky pent-up energy, or if the deck feels like it's just exhausted to the point where it can't give enough, it can't give enough accuracy. But I don't really put them back in order otherwise. There are 2 decks that I do keep in order frequently, but I've been doing so ever since I got them, and that is because they are my study decks. So the first deck that I keep in order is my Ethereal Visions tarot deck, which again, if you want to see any of the decks I'm mentioning in this video, you can watch my tarot collection or my oracle video. I will put a few cards probably up on the screen so you know what I'm talking about. But my Ethereal Visions tarot deck goes in order quite frequently because it's an RWS clone, for example, and I think the imagery is very soft, it's very appealing, and so I like using it to learn. I would use my traditional RWS to learn, except that deck has a very brash energy and can feel very judgmental at times. So I tend to like my Ethereal Visions because it feels a little less judgy. I also put my Arcana Isis Sakura in order for study purposes because that deck has zodiacal and astrological meanings as well as a keyword on every single card, and it's also packed with tons of symbolism, and it's a Thoth-based system. So those are the 2 decks that tend to stay in order for me for the most part, but otherwise I don't really reset my decks very often. I don't put them back in order unless it seems like it's very necessary. Okay, so the next weird thing I do with my tarot practice is I keep decks on my altar. So I have an altar space, and on it I will decorate it with the energies that I want to draw into my life. So I have suns, moons, I have runes I have witches runes as well as Nordic runes, tarot cards, just a lot of different ways to draw in a certain energy to help me to move through life. If I am struggling with masculine energy, I will pull out more masculine-based symbolic items, whether that be in runes or in my tarot cards, or if I was struggling with creativity, I might pull out the Empress or something. Right now on my altar I have the Magician, which I can see. I have 2 other cards on there, but I can't quite tell what they are at the moment unless I go over there, and I don't want to do that. But I do have 3 cards there. I do need to switch them out though, because I feel like I've kind of accomplished that energy recently and I would like to draw in different energy into my life. Maybe I would pull out the 3 of Cups because I'm kind of craving friendship and going out with the girls and just kind of having a good time. So I think I might pull that out soon. But basically I will pick a deck and then I will pick certain cards to put on my altar to draw certain energy into my life. And it kind of depends on which deck I'll choose. So right now I'm using the Mystical Dream Tarot. That's the deck that is currently, certain cards are currently on the altar, though I have put Santa Muerte, Tarot of the Divine, and the Fairy Tarot there. So it kind of depends. I usually pick decks that I don't use a ton because if I'm going to be using a deck, I don't want to have the cards on the altar and then have to shuffle them in and then pull them back out later. So I typically pick a deck that I know I'm not going to be using very frequently, and that's the one that gets set up. I also think of the colors, the imagery of each card, what do I want to draw into my life. I do think I'm going to pull Santa Muerte out because October is coming and I'm so ready for it. Halloween is coming and I think that that would be a really good deck to have up there. Despite not really being a creepy deck in its own right, it's honestly a deck that to me feels very wholesome and sweet, but I kind of like the imagery, so I think I'm going to use that because I know I'm going to be using Crow Tarot and Dark Wood a ton these next few months because I'm craving the shadow work and the darker energy. But yeah, I tend to pick tarot cards out of a certain deck and put them up on the altar to, inspire certain energy and certain moods in my space. Alright, so this is the last little quirky bit that I have for today that I do with all of my decks, and that is, or almost all of my decks, and that is a buddy system. My decks have a buddy system. So there are certain decks that I just pair together and they are always paired together. Some of them share the same buddy and some of them don't even have any buddies. So let me explain. I kind of mentioned this, I think, in my tarot collection video, or maybe my oracle one of the two. I know I mentioned it, but I don't think I went into depth, so I'm going to now. My decks have certain partners, buddies, if you will, that I will pull and I will use them together. It's based completely on their colors, their imagery, and their vibes. So I tend to use my RWS, my traditional RWS, with both the plant oracle as well as the spirit animal oracle, because for one, the spirit animal oracle was the first oracle deck I ever had and the RWS was the first tarot deck I ever had, and the two of them work really well together because that's how I used them for the longest time. And then the plant oracle, the imagery just works better with the RWS deck, and I think that they do very similar reading. They have very similar reading styles. On the other hand, my Mystical Dream Tarot gets paired with the Crystal Oracle. My Crow Tarot often works with the Darkwood Tarot, so I'm not opposed to blending 2 tarot decks together. My Arcana Isis Sakra often gets paired with Ethereal Visions, again very similar energies, so I tend to like to do that, to pair either 2 tarot decks together or a tarot deck and an oracle deck together. And there are multiple buddies and they do kind of like mix and match every now and again, but for the most part I like to blend them together. Crow Tarot, for example, often gets read with the Archetypes Oracle by Kim Kranz, so as you can see it's read with both Darkwood and the Archetype. Darkwood itself is also read with the Archetype sometimes as well, just because I feel like all 3 of them are very dark and they dive very deep into your psyche, into like the shadow work aspect, so I really like working with them together. Having the buddy system is also really helpful when I do multiple decks in a reading, which I really enjoy doing. I do typically just bring out 1 deck for myself, but when I do grand readings, I like to have about 2 or 3 decks. So about 2 tarot and 1 oracle, or 1 tarot and 2 oracle, if that makes sense. I don't do 3 tarot. I did it once, it was not a good idea. But that's kind of what I do to enhance a reading. And when I give client readings, of course, I will do about 1 tarot, 1 oracle, or sometimes 2 tarot, 1 oracle. I don't typically do 2 oracle in a client reading. But, so that's kind of like the reason that there is a buddy system, because I do like to have multiple decks, especially for the in-depth readings. As a bonus, I know I mentioned that that was the last little quirk that I did, but I have 1 more. I do have 1 more quirk, and that is that I don't really use prompted readings for the most part. In my personal practice, in the mornings, I do ask those questions sometimes, and that's kind of the only time that I really use prompts for tarot spreads. For the most part, I just pull out a bunch of cards all at once and then decipher the meaning with no explicit questions asked, if that makes sense. Like, I don't ask a specific question and then pull one card for each question. I just kind of pull a ton and see where we go. So it's very intuitive, it's very open-ended, and I just kind of focus on a certain energy or situation and then just pull a bunch of cards to see what happens. When I give client readings, I do not ask specific questions. I don't have my clients ask specific questions. I just pull a bunch of cards and then decipher the meanings based on that. When I do the in-depth readings for myself, same thing. The only time that I use prompts for my tarot readings is the morning spreads when I have specific questions. Sometimes in the evenings, but usually I don't. I just pull a few cards to see what happened for the day, what I missed, what I need to learn. And when I do past life readings. So past life readings are all prompted for me, but aside from that, I don't really use prompts for tarot readings. I don't do it on the new moon, full moon and stuff. Sometimes I have played around with it, but I tend to like just during those certain astrological events, just pulling a bunch of cards and seeing where we go. I don't really like to be rigid and only ask a specific question. Instead, I focus on the energy and just pull a bunch of different cards and then read it more like a storybook and less like a question and answer essay. But I thought I would add that as a bonus. Alright, so I really hope that I answered your question about my daily tarot practice and just my practice in general. If you guys are interested in any more parts of my practice, there are some things I'm not quite willing to share yet online, but there are other bits that I think that I would definitely share, especially regarding the tarot, because I feel like that is the part where I'm so solid in my belief and it's such a big part of my life that, and I obviously read for clients, so I have no problem sharing that with you guys. If you have any questions about my tarot decks, oracle, practice, whatever, let me know. If you want to see more tarot and practice sort of content, again inspired by Katie Flowers, but I really enjoyed doing that with the fairy tarot, so I kind of want to do it again. Let me know. I am planning on getting a few decks, so there's one coming in October. I'm so ready. But anyway, yeah, thank you again for watching today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and yeah, until next time, I will catch you later.